The small town was nestled at the foot of the mountains. Here, everyone looked after themselves and handled their own affairs. People greeted each other warmly, but no one interfered in anyone else's business. Especially when it came to bread, everyone was very particular. In the garden of every house there was a small stone oven. Early in the morning, smoke would rise, the smell of flour would fill the air, and every household would bake their own bread. However, this task was not as easy as it seemed. Finding wood to heat the ovens was necessary. On some days, the wind would blow fiercely, making it difficult to light the fire. Sometimes, the ovens wouldn't get hot enough before the dough was ready, and the bread would either remain raw or burn. The elders of the town had maintained this system for years, but an old woman came up with an idea that would change everything. This woman, whom everyone called grandmother, was white-haired and had a smiling face. In her youth, she had traveled extensively and seen different places. One day, she stood in the middle of the town square and said to the people gathered around her, "Why do we all build separate ovens? Wouldn't it be better if we built a large oven together and everyone baked their bread there?" The townspeople initially looked at this idea with astonishment. Some frowned, others laughed. "That's impossible," said one man. "Everyone bakes their own bread. That's how it is." Another added, "What if there's no room in the oven? What if someone's bread takes up too much space?" Grandmother listened patiently, smiled, and simply said, "Maybe it's worth trying." However, no one took this idea seriously. That day, everyone baked their bread in their own oven again. The next morning, large stones began to pile up in the middle of the town. Grandmother was working alone. With her own hands, she was stacking the stones, starting to build a large oven. Grandmother continued to pile stones on top of each other in the middle of the town. The backs of her hands were dusty, sweat was dripping from her forehead, but she worked tirelessly. The townspeople were still watching her. Some shook their heads and went back to their work, while others continued to watch with curiosity. Just then, a small child stepped forward from the crowd. Wearing a patched shirt and walking carefully with bare feet, he approached the grandmother. This child was Ariel, the son of one of the village bakers. His father always told him, "Bread is the most precious thing, but it's most beautiful when shared." Ariel looked at the grandmother and quietly bent down to pick up a stone from the ground. Then, with great effort, he placed it on the foundation of the oven. Grandmother smiled. "Thank you, Ariel," she said. Ariel said nothing, but there was determination on his face. Seeing his action, another person, Master Felix the carpenter of the town, took a step out of the crowd. "If this oven is going to be big, it needs a sturdy door," he said. "I'll make a door." And so, Master Felix set to work. Then another, then another. Slowly, a large oven began to rise in the town square, built by everyone contributing what they could. But this time, another problem arose. Sage Arthur, one of the town's leading figures, stood with his arms crossed and a frown on his face. He was someone who had baked his own bread in his own oven for years and did not want this system to change. He called out to the crowd, "If you do this, everyone will become lazy. Those who don't heat their own ovens will use the labor of others. We are not such a town." When the townspeople heard these words, they paused. Would building a large oven really cause people not to work? Or would sharing make them even stronger? When Sage Arthur's words echoed in the square, there was silence. People looked at each other. Some stopped placing stones, others shook their heads and stepped back. Sage Arthur was one of the most respected people in the town. For years he had fed both his family and some of the town's poor with the bread he baked in his own oven. His word carried weight in the town. Grandmother slowly straightened up, resting her hands on her knees. Grains of flour mixed in her hair glistened in the sun. The wrinkles on her face carried the wisdom of years. She took a deep breath and began to speak calmly. "Sage Arthur," she said, You have been making the best bread in town for years. You know the consistency of the dough, the heat of the oven, the smoke of the wood better than anyone else. But tell me, have you ever had to bake someone else's bread until today?" Sage Arthur frowned. He didn't answer, but his eyes softened slightly. Grandmother continued, "I have. When I was young, I arrived in a town I had never known before. I had a bag of flour with me, but I didn't have an oven. I didn't have the time or the strength to build my own oven. The people there shared their ovens with me. They shared not only their ovens, but also their knowledge. I learned how my dough rises. I learned when it's time to bake. The bread I baked in their oven was the most precious bread of my life, because that bread made me feel like I wasn't alone." The people filling the square listened in silence. Grandmother touched the half-finished walls of the stone oven and added, "The bread we bake in our own ovens is only ours, but the bread baked in this oven will belong to all of us. The poorest in town will come here and bake their bread, and so will the strongest man. Sharing doesn't weaken us. On the contrary, it makes us strong." At that moment, Ariel tightly grasped the stone in her hand and placed it on the oven wall. She looked up at the townspeople. "My father always says that bread tastes better when shared," she said. Several people nodded after these words. One of them placed a new stone on the foundation of the oven, then another. The people who had hesitated a moment ago returned one by one to the oven. However, Sage Arthur still stood with his arms crossed over his chest. His gaze was stern, but the expression on his face had changed. Without saying anything, he slowly began to walk away from the center of the square. Night had fallen. Only the sound of the wind could be heard in the streets of the small town. As the pale light seeping from the small windows of the houses went out one by one, the half-finished stone oven stood silently in the square. After a day of work, everyone was tired and had gone to sleep, but one person was still awake. Sage Arthur had not slept. He stood by the window in his house, watching the square. His chin was in his hand, his eyes on the oven. He remembered the grandmother's words from earlier in the day. "The bread we bake in our own ovens is only ours, but the bread baked in this oven will belong to all of us." He had always baked his own bread. His father had done the same, and so had his grandfather. Sharing, in his opinion, was laziness. A person should put in their own effort, earn their own bread, but still, a voice inside him prevented him from taking his eyes off the oven. Finally, he succumbed to his thoughts. He slowly got up, put on his coat, and left the house. The square was silent. Moonlight struck the stones, casting long shadows on the half-finished walls of the oven. Sage Arthur slowly approached with a lantern in his hand. When he looked at the oven, he felt a strange feeling inside. He remembered everyone coming together throughout the day and stacking the stones. Ariel's image with her hands covered in dough came to his mind. Master Felix's door had not yet been installed, and the walls were not complete either. Sage Arthur first touched the oven. The stones were cold. He leaned in and looked inside the oven. Nothing had been baked yet. A strange unease filled him. He paused for a moment. Then his eyes fell on the foundation of the oven. One of the stones there caught his attention. It looked slightly askew. If someone accidentally bumped into it, perhaps the entire structure could be damaged. Sage Arthur hesitated for a moment. Should he leave? Or should he do something? He took a deep breath. Then he slowly bent down, picked up one of the stones, and carefully placed it on the oven wall. Immediately after, he straightened a few nearby stones as well. When he finished, the oven looked a little sturdier. Just then, a voice was heard. "What are you doing here?" Sage Arthur quickly turned around. In the light of the lantern, Grandmother appeared. She was also awake. She had also been thinking about the oven. Sage Arthur's heart beat rapidly. Grandmother's voice echoed in the silence of the night. At that moment, he held his breath without even realizing it. "What are you doing here?" Grandmother had asked. Sage Arthur paused for a moment. For a few seconds, he searched for the right words to defend himself or explain, but then his pride took over. "Nothing," he grumbled. "I just came out for some air." He quickly turned off his lantern and began to walk away from the oven with quick steps. "Were you fixing the stones of the oven to get some fresh air at night?" said Grandmother with a mocking smile. Sage Arthur did not answer. He walked quickly into the darkness of the night and soon disappeared from sight, but he was not at ease. His heart would not calm down. Grandmother remained where she was. She touched the stones of the oven. The stones that Sage Arthur had straightened looked more solid than before. She smiled inwardly but did not say it out loud. When morning came, the townspeople gathered around the oven again. Ariel noticed that the stones were straighter than before and exclaimed excitedly, "Someone came at night and fixed this!" The townspeople looked at each other in surprise. No one understood what had happened. While everyone was asking each other questions, Grandmother silently touched the wall of the oven and smiled. Sage Arthur stood away from the oven that morning without speaking to anyone. He didn't want to reveal anything. As the morning sun illuminated the town, the square became crowded again. Ariel and a few children admired the stones that had been fixed during the night, while Master Felix was installing the oven door. The women were impatient to bake bread as soon as possible. There was a strange excitement in everyone. Just when everything seemed to be going well, an unexpected voice was heard. "Water! Bring water! Quickly!" It was Magnus, one of the town's bakers, shouting. His face, filled with fear, was turned towards the lower part of the town, towards the stream. People started running towards the direction of the voice. Near the oven, a water barrel lay toppled on the ground. The water inside had mixed with the soil, and the clay mortar used in the oven's construction had begun to dry. "If we don't have this water, we won't be able to finish the top of the oven," Master Felix said anxiously. "Without mortar, the stones won't hold. We need to get new water as soon as possible." The town's largest water source was the stream down below, but it was said that the water had been dwindling lately. If they couldn't find enough water, the completion of the oven could be delayed for days. While everyone whispered among themselves, Ariel bravely stepped forward. "I'll go. I'll bring water from the stream." But Magnus shook his head. "It's not that easy, child. 1 or 2 jugs of water won't be enough to complete a whole oven. We need to carry a whole barrel of water." As the townspeople looked at each other helplessly, Sage Arthur stood silently by the edge of the oven, watching them. There was a faint expression of thought on his face. Silence reigned in the town square. Everyone was looking at the overturned water barrel, at the water seeping into the ground. Master Felix and Magnus were worried, while the women were discussing whether enough water could be carried from the stream. Although Ariel's courage was admired, no one believed that she could bring enough water to fill a whole barrel on her own. Just then, Sage Arthur, who had been waiting silently at the edge of the square, took a deep breath. First, he stood with his arms crossed over his chest. Then he slowly took a step forward. His eyes wandered over the half-finished stones of the oven. He thought about the stones he had fixed in the darkness of the night. If the oven was left unfinished, all that effort would have been in vain. He was hesitant, but a feeling inside him moved him. "I'm coming too," said Sage Arthur. This sentence spread through the square like a whisper. At first, no one seemed to have heard it properly. Then Grandmother turned to him with a slight smile. "What did you say, Sage Arthur?" Sage Arthur straightened his shoulders. This time he raised his voice. "I'm coming too," he said. "While all these people are standing here waiting and arguing, the water won't come here by itself. If you really want to finish this oven, then you'll have to lend a hand to bring the water." Ariel's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Let's go then." Seeing Ariel's excitement, Sage Arthur smiled subtly, but his face immediately became serious. "Not so fast, child. If we really want to bring a barrel full of water, just going back and forth with jugs won't be enough. We need to prepare a water cart with a few people. We'll put the barrel in it, fill it with water, and then bring it back to town." Magnus nodded. "Sage Arthur is right," he said. "The stream is a bit down from the town, but the way back is uphill. If we try to carry it with jugs, it will take us days. If we go with a cart, we can carry it all in one go." A few of the town's men immediately moved to bring out the old water cart. Ariel eagerly stepped forward to help carry the barrel. Sage Arthur silently took his place beside them. Within a few minutes, everything was ready. Sage Arthur, Ariel, and a few townspeople began to walk out of town, pulling the old wooden water cart. The road seemed easy at first. However, as they got closer to the stream, the ground became more uneven. Pebbles slipped under their feet, and the wheels of the old cart occasionally got stuck on stones. Ariel walked beside Sage Arthur. "What do you think it will be like when the oven is finished?" she asked. Sage Arthur shrugged. "An oven is just an oven," he said. "It's made of stones, you put wood inside, and you bake bread." Ariel smiled. "But this oven will be different. Everyone's bread will be baked there." Sage Arthur silently looked at the child. Was it really that simple? Sharing the bread he baked in his own oven had never been easy, but he thought about what he had felt while fixing the stones of the oven at night. Even for a moment, what he had done had benefited the town. The journey took longer than they had anticipated. By the time they finally reached the stream, everyone was tired, but the hard part was just beginning. Filling the barrel with water and carrying it back full. Sage Arthur wiped his sweat and bent down. "All right, everyone, let's take turns filling the buckets and emptying them into the barrel. But be careful. Let's not waste any water." Ariel held the bucket tightly with both hands and dipped it into the stream. The cold water chilled her hands, but she didn't care. She excitedly lifted the full bucket and poured it into the barrel. The others started filling water in turn as well. Slowly, the barrel began to fill. Just then, dark clouds gathering on the hill covered the sky. A few drops of water fell to the ground. Sage Arthur looked up at the clouds. "It's going to rain," he said. "If it gets muddy, it will be difficult to pull the cart. We should head back immediately." When the first raindrops fell on the ground, the townspeople paused for a brief moment. Sage Arthur frowned, examining the dark grey clouds gathering on the hill. If the rain intensified, the roads could turn to mud, making it much harder to take the water cart back to town. But on the other hand, the rain brought a great opportunity for more water. Ariel couldn't contain her excitement. "It's raining! We can collect more water!" Sage Arthur nodded. "You're right, child. If the rain gets heavy, we can fill the barrel completely. Maybe we can even collect a few extra jugs of water." Magnus and the other townspeople also liked this idea. Carrying water was hard work, but water was falling from the sky for free. It would be foolish not to take advantage of this opportunity. "Let's get to work immediately," said Sage Arthur. "We need to have everything ready before the rain intensifies." Everyone started moving quickly. First, they completely opened the lid of the barrel so that the raindrops could fall directly inside. Then they placed the jugs they had brought with them in a large circle formed by the buckets. As the raindrops filled these jugs, they would have a better chance of collecting more water. Ariel opened her arms and looked up at the sky. "This is wonderful!" she exclaimed. "Thanks to the rain, our work will be easier." Sage Arthur smiled slightly at the child's excitement. He also used to love the rain in his youth, but over the years he had begun to feel the unpleasant aspects of the cold water more. Still, he couldn't deny that it was useful for their work right now. The rain was gradually intensifying. As large drops fell on the ground, dust was replaced by dark brown mud. Shoes began to sink into the soil, but the townspeople continued their work without caring. Grandmother's words echoed in Sage Arthur's mind. Sharing is not just giving what we have. Sometimes we can also share things we never thought of. Now, collecting this water that came with the rain was exactly like that. Nature was helping them, and they were using it for the town. As the storm grew stronger, the wind also began to blow hard. Trees swayed and branches creaked and bent. Just when everything seemed to be going well, a voice was heard from afar. "Watch out! The stream is overflowing." Sage Arthur suddenly raised his head. In the distance, he could see the water level of the stream rising rapidly. Since the rainwater had saturated the soil, the excess water was flowing directly into the stream. Magnus's eyes widened. "If the stream overflows, everything here will be swept away." Ariel looked back in fear. The barrel was not yet full, but quite a bit of water had accumulated in the jugs. If the water level continued to rise, the water cart and the barrel could all be lost in the flood before they could move them to a safe place. Sage Arthur had to make a quick decision. Sage Arthur's eyes were fixed on the rapidly rising stream. The color of the water had turned dark brown. This was a sign of the mud coming with the rain. The current had accelerated, and small waves had begun to form on the surface of the water. The stream, which had been calm just a few minutes ago, was now becoming dangerous. "We need to take the water cart and return to town immediately," Sage Arthur shouted. Magnus, his eyes fixed on the stream, nodded thoughtfully. "But the barrel isn't completely full yet. If we wait a little longer..." "If we wait, we'll lose everything," Sage Arthur interrupted sharply. "Look, the water level is rising visibly. If we don't hurry, the water cart will get stuck in the mud. Or worse, it will be swept away by the flood." Ariel ran to the water cart in a panic. Come on, we have to go." The rain had intensified. Large drops were rapidly softening the ground, and their feet sank a little more with each step. Magnus and the other townspeople grabbed the handles of the water cart and began to push the barrel. But the mud had become heavy. With each push, the wheels sank a little further into the soil, making progress difficult. Sage Arthur took a deep breath. "We need to push harder. Everyone push at the same time." When the townspeople pushed the water cart with all their might, the wheels broke free from the mud and moved forward a few inches, but the road was long. Rain lashed their faces, and the wind chilled them to the bone. Sage Arthur felt his knees sinking into the mud with every step, but he couldn't stop. They were working for the oven, and if they didn't get this water to the town, everything could be in vain. Ariel walked quickly beside the water cart. Her small hands gripped the wooden sides. "Did we make it? Will we be able to get to town?" Sage Arthur shook his head firmly. "We have to make it." Just as they were approaching the town, they suddenly noticed a large puddle in front of them. The rain had formed a small lake in the lowest part of the road. If the wheels went in there, there was a very high chance that the water cart would get stuck. Magnus and Master Felix looked at each other. "What are we going to do? If we can't get through here, we can't go back." Sage Arthur quickly looked around. There were a few large stones and broken branches by the side of the road. If they could use these to create a path, they could cross without the water cart getting stuck. He took a deep breath. "Quickly, place the stones and branches on the puddle. We need to make a sturdy path." The townspeople quickly set to work. They began to create a small path by throwing the stones they had in their hands into the water. When they supported it with branches, a temporary but solid bridge was formed. "Okay," said Sage Arthur. "Now we will all push carefully together. We must cross without losing our balance." Ariel nodded excitedly. "Let's do it!" The townspeople carefully moved the water cart forward. The wheels jolted slightly when they hit the stones, but no one stopped. After a few difficult seconds, they finally managed to cross the puddle. Everyone took a deep breath when the town square came into view. They were safe now. As they entered the town, the people waiting in the square greeted them with applause. Grandmother walked towards them with a slight smile. "I've lived in this town for so many years, but this is the first time I've seen everyone work so hard for one thing," she said proudly. Ariel excitedly jumped forward and began to speak. It started raining, the stream overflowed, the roads turned to mud, but we still brought the water. One of the women approached the barrel and touched the water inside. Is this water enough to complete the oven? Master Felix nodded. Yes, but more importantly, I think we all understand what this oven means now. The townspeople looked at each other. Even those who initially thought they didn't need a large oven now realized how important this place was for the town. Sage Arthur stood silently to the side. He now understood more clearly the strange feeling he had felt while fixing the stones of the oven at night. They had come together not only to bake bread, but also to learn to work together and share. Grandmother walked towards him and nodded slightly. Do you see, Sage Arthur? Sharing is not just giving what we have. Sharing is sometimes overcoming difficulties together, sharing the same goal, walking the same path. Sage Arthur sighed. He smiled as he shrugged off his rain-soaked coat. I think I'm just beginning to understand. The townspeople went back to work to complete the oven. Everyone pitched in. This oven would no longer be just a place to bake bread. It would become the most important point of the town. The completion of the oven was very close, but the townspeople were still discussing how they would share the bread. The oven was almost finished. The last stones had been put in place, the chimney had been raised, and the interior had been widened to accommodate a large hearth. The townspeople had gathered excitedly in front of the oven. This was the first task they had accomplished through their joint effort, and everyone was waiting with great curiosity. However, there was a problem. Everyone was discussing how they would use the oven and how they would share the bread. So, what happens now? Asked Magnus. We all built the oven, but how will we divide the bread? Who will bake and when? Added old Master Felix. What if some people use the oven more than others? Clara worried. The townspeople began to murmur. This was a situation they had never encountered before. Until now, everyone had baked in their own small oven, made their own bread, and only took enough for their own family. But now they had a large oven. As the discussions grew louder, Grandmother watched them silently. She looked at each one of them carefully. Everyone was talking, but no one could come up with a solution. Finally, she took a deep breath and tapped her cane on the ground. My children, she said slowly, this oven does not belong to one person, but to all of us. If we work together to build this oven, then we must also be fair when sharing the bread. Everyone fell silent. Grandmother had spoken at the most important moment, as always. So we must find a way to share the bread. But how? Said Sage Arthur. The townspeople thought for a long time. Everyone had different ideas. Whoever bakes the bread in the oven should get the biggest share, said one person. Then some people will never get any bread, countered another. Maybe we should take turns baking, suggested one of the young people. But the oven needs wood not only for baking but also for heating. So who will bring the wood? The discussions continued for a long time. Everyone knew that the bread should be divided fairly, but they couldn't decide how. Just then, Magnus jumped up excitedly. What if we give the bread according to who needs it most? Sage Arthur frowned. What do you mean? Let's think about it this way, said Magnus. Sometimes some families in our town struggle more than others. Those with young children, the elderly or the sick might need more bread. Maybe when we share the bread fairly, we should consider those in need. The townspeople liked this idea. Several people nodded. Yes, said Clara. That way, everyone gets as much bread as they really need. But who will manage this system? Asked Sage Arthur. Who will decide who gets how much bread? We must do it together, said Grandmother. We know each other. We all know who is hungry and who is in need. So let's make the decisions together. After discussing for a while longer, the townspeople finally reached an agreement. The oven was the common property of everyone. Everyone could contribute to it, but no one could be the sole owner of the oven. Bread would be baked in turns. Each family would use the oven on designated days. Everyone would bring wood. Everyone had to bring as much wood as they could to keep the oven warm. Bread would be distributed according to need. The elderly, children, and those in difficult situations in the town would have priority. When the rules were set, everyone sighed in relief. The oven was no longer just a stone structure, but had become the most important sharing point of the town. Sage Arthur looked at the oven. It turns out this oven was here not just to bake bread, but to bring us together, he said with a smile. Grandmother nodded. That's the whole point, my son. Sharing is not just giving what we have. Sharing is being a community. That day, the townspeople celebrated the opening of their oven. The first baked bread was shared together. From then on, no one in the town would go hungry. And over time, the shared oven became the warmest, most peaceful place in the town.